It didn't go live. What up, folks? One of my favorite things to do. My wife hears me do that, and she, I think, rolls her eyes across the house. She's like, he's at it again. But dude, so excited to be back. Had a crazy, fun, all but exhausting vacation in Disney World last week with the family. Dude, you go to Disney World and you realize that, like, shit, I'm walking like 10 miles a day. It's like a full-blown workout to go to Disney World. It was pretty wild, but we had a good time. Family loved it, but I'm happy to be back because this is the stuff that excites me and drives me. But we got the man, the myth, the legend, Infinity here. Infinity, welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited. I think, I don't know how, I think I literally found you from just going through like the Say Cabal whitelist pre-sales. And I saw your artwork and I was like, man, that's some pretty dope artwork. And I went in and you were one of the few people that are like, hey man, I saw your podcast and I really appreciate it. And I was like, well, let's just keep on talking. Cause thank you for being one of the million people that recognize one of the 1 in 1 million people that recognize me. Lots of people have come past my stuff, but no one's actually like, hey, you do a pretty good job. So I do appreciate those props, brother.
Yeah, no problem. I love paying attention to the community. And just as a quick tad bit, is nice guys can finish first.
Yes, we will talk about that for sure. Quick housekeeping updating items. We have another awesome, and I wouldn't call this more a project, but just prolific, really cool artist, and Sold One. He's already launched a collection on SEI. He's coming on Friday. He's a serial entrepreneur himself. He started his own weed business, which is a really interesting story. So we're going to have a fantastic conversation on that. Further in the future, we have an exchange coming on called Aura Exchange. We're talking to the founders of The Forge, who are all about the real world assets, specifically in real estate. So we got a lot of really cool conversations coming up. We've been giving away some free NFTs and some tokens to the OG midlife community. So we're just getting started. Maddie is still alive. We're going to try to do the exchange podcast. Maddie coming back around April 1st. So we'll have finally Maddie back and doing our full-blown midlife crisis podcast. And I think that's about it. But yeah, excited, just super happy to be here. And you know what, dude? I think your community's tuned in. I see upwards of 30 people watching us right now. So props to the zombie crew coming out in full force watching this podcast. But yeah, that's all the housekeeping items. And let's get to the actual show, because this is my favorite part of my day when I have a podcast. But before we get into the world famous midlife crisis question, I have to do the formal intro of Infinity. So first off, dude's been president of a bajillion organizations, mostly student programs organizations, one of them being the Business Professionals of America. But like, you know, I've been part of organizations, but one thing I've never done is be a president. And I can imagine that takes up a lot of time. What about it, Infinity? Like, that had to be a time suck, right?
Well, so here's the thing. Like, when I was navigating through high school, I realized that like the vice president actually does the least amount of work. And then like second to that would be treasurer, and then the president. So like the president's actually not doing the most work as you would have you perceive. It's the secretary normally, or the parliamentarian.
Okay. Well, I learn something new every day. Again, why I love having these conversations. But still, I mean, you have to sow some ambition to become a president of anything. So props to you on that. And then next really comes, well, we got One Side Detour, which is probably the youngest life insurance agent in Texas. Would you pass that exam when you were 18? Right?
I did it on my 18th birthday. So yeah, no one can really like get it earlier than me, right? Because you have to be 18 to take the test.
He's one of the youngest in state history in Texas to pass the life and health exam. So that's again yet another accomplishment. But then we detour into, which we'll have a big conversation about, which is exciting because I don't think I've ever had anybody on the podcast that has got as deep as you have into competitive cards and trading cards, and that sucked up a lot of your time. Um, you've been doing trading cards for how long now?
Man, to tell you the truth, I can't even recall it. Like, so I was 14 when I bought 12 booster boxes of a Magic the Gathering set called Darksteel. I had to literally Google Darksteel to know when that age gap was for me.
That's
So yeah,
insane.
over 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you've been doing it for decades, which comes with probably a bunch of fascinating stories, but also its challenges too. We talked about we both had some mental health challenges in the past, and we might touch on that too. Because when you're grinding on something so hard for so long, it does take a toll on you, and we'll talk about that. But I think that's a fascinating world, and I'm pretty excited to get into that. And then finally, Infinity, dude's just grinding Web3 full time, which is really cool. I talked to a lot of people that are actually straddling both worlds. It's actually very rare, other than um, founders, obviously, but even a lot of founders that I talk to are not Web3 full time. You know, they're still doing other things. So it's cool that you're Web3 full time to be able to completely embrace what's going on in the space and be a true founder. So props to you. Anything else to add there, Infinity? Did I miss anything, or does that sound
No,
about right?
no. That sounds everything sounded pretty good there.
All right, fantastic. So, on to the meat of the podcast, which is the world famous midlife crisis question. I will repeat this. Affinity has heard this about 100 times already, prepping for this, but it is, how did you get to the seat you're sitting in today? We describe it as give us Star Wars episode 1, 2, and 3. Infinity is one of the few people that reminded me that that's not actually how Star Wars works. It's not really the 1, 2, and 3. But I said, listen, most people have not watched Star Wars intimately. So we're really just going for chronological order. So Star Wars 1 in our mind would be your childhood, any influences that you had there to help mold your mindset that you have today. 2 would be college, professional career, in your case, this amazing trading card world ecosystem. And then 3 is your Web3 journey beyond what you're doing now. So I cannot wait to have this conversation, man. Let's start with episode 1, kick it off, and it's going to be magical.
All right. Sounds good. So I first started like doing the whole trading card game at a really young age because growing up I had a lot of babysitters, and then whenever some of my babysitter would take me to a card store called Billy D's, and that's where I learned Magic the Gathering. So I was playing card games at a very young age, be it Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, or Pokemon, right? And
Right.
so but growing up in like I sort of grew up in Southwest Alief, Texas, which is sort of like the hood. And my mom then brought me to Fort Bend. Oh, I guess I'm doxing myself a little bit. I didn't really want to fully dox, but that's fine. So it's like more of a preppier side of Houston, right? So it was
Right,
a
right,
big transition for me there. And going there, like it was really hard to fit in the beginning, and like it like cards and gaming was just always a space that it felt like it was my world, right? Like it had this ability to like pretty much growing up Asian and Chinese, like if you're not a doctor or lawyer, you're sort of like a failure in sort of
right,
their eyes, right? So
right.
gaming has always played a huge part, be it RuneScape, Gunbound, Neopets. Like I was actually one of the richest people in all those games. Um,
Wow.
yeah. So trading has always been like a huge part of my life and like the hustle
Mhm.
mentality of it. Be it
Right,
like buying my cousin's Gunbound account, which was like think like top 0.01, 0.05% of the world or something, because he had a
right.
Silver Dragon account or Blue Dragon.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Dude, so you already said a couple things there. I mean, I'm going to give you maybe a barely passable grade on episode 1. You started off strong, but then you just faded out there. But I think you said some things that I'm interested in. And again, when I start prying into this stuff, you don't feel comfortable talking about it, just let me know.
No, go
I'm
ahead.
already interested in the first thing that I think was fascinating. You went from the hood to Prepville, all right? And
Yeah.
so the hood life, the not so fortunate life, are there any things in that time frame that you remember that helped kinda mold your mindset, like I said, or, impacted you in a certain way?
Yeah. So like whenever I was like in elementary school, like there was a math competition called Math Olympiads, and I ended up tying for first place, right? But, like, the trophy that we received was, like, literally probably, like, the size of your hand or smaller than the size of your hand. And,
Right.
like, when you're going to, like, this preparatory school or, like, a much better prestigious district, like, you if you get 3rd place or even, like, the participation trophies are bigger than, like, winning the trophy of, like, the whole school. Like,
Right.
so that
Right.
was something a little bit odd that I realized that there was a metric there missing.
Interesting. Now, I think that's a fascinating insight, and that just comes from, I think, just a practical sense of funding, right? I mean, is there anything else there, or is it just that simple as, in the kind of poorer neighborhoods, the schools just don't have as much money,
I would imagine that they all get allocated a certain amount, right? But I mean, it is separated off by district. It's
right?
just up to them to choose how they reward their students. And I think that's a very important part of it. It's like the reward process you give to acknowledge the people for doing what they're doing, right?
Interesting. So that, yeah, no, absolutely interesting. So you're actually saying too, is what I'm kind of reading into, is that like you felt tangibly a difference of in how you were rewarded between the two places. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think that led to a big part of me pushing myself harder too, because the reward was there, the acknowledgement was there. Whereas like if you're in the hood, like a lot of it goes less acknowledged outside of if you're just a star athlete, right?
Right, right. And so, that's really interesting. I never thought about it that way. And it's just really the theory in this and debate about incentives and what incentives resonate with people, right? Because I don't think looking back at my childhood, I guess when you're a child, a trophy is a pretty big deal, right? And if you get a bigger trophy, you're probably more incentivized or motivated to get that thing. That's just an interesting twist. I've never heard anybody talk about it that way. But back to the, still kind of this transition, right? Obviously something happened to be able to go to the more fortunate place. Was that, just your parents' hard work, or was there anything there in the life or experiences that helped facilitate that transition?
Yeah, so I was a single child with a single mother, right? And she just worked really hard because she wanted to provide me with the best opportunity. And
Mhm.
that pretty much opened my vision and scope on a whole nother level.
Right, right. And so what do you think you learned, say, top 2 to 3 skill sets from watching your mom? 1, listen, man, I'm recently a new parent. Uh, I have a 6-month-old now, and my mom was 19 when she had me. 1, I can't imagine having a kid at 19. Like, how do you even put life together, right? I don't even know what I wanna do. I'm in college. I mean, took me at least another decade to start formulating an opinion about what I wanted to do with my life. But 2, I have my grandparents close by. I have my wife. I could not fathom being a single parent. So it's just such an insane quality to have to be able to do that, and then obviously, um, do a good job. You're here, you're a founder of a Web3 company. You've been successful in the past at things that you've done. Like, to produce that is just that is the hardest job in the world, I think, and I don't people give enough credit. So with that being said, what did you learn from her? Like, what are the characteristics or the traits or the mantras that she taught you?
I believe one of the biggest things is perseverance. We touched bases on this a little bit prior to the going live, is that
Yeah,
like hard work doesn't necessarily get you to where you need to be in life, right? So
yeah,
that's one of the things that I've started understanding more and more as time progressed. Because I was always a hard worker growing up. I mean, I still am now, but I also decide to work smarter, right? Incorporating the right teams,
right.
surrounding yourself with the right people, and that's what like that transition from the hood to like Fort Bend opened up for me. Because a lot of the people I went to school with are now like lead designer of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, right? And there's
Right.
a multitude of them.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I think perseverance is one of the discipline, perseverance, whatever you say. You hear that often on this show. Anything else there, or you wanna keep it at perseverance? Any other tidbits there looking back?
Hmm, Looking back at everything, I would say perseverance and saving, right? So, like,
Ooh,
we all know, like, Benjamin's favorite quote, a penny saved is a penny earned, right? But being
right.
like the whole life insurance mathematical person that I am, like a penny saved is actually more than a penny earned, right? Because if you
Right.
talk about the percentage wise, it's like you're actually getting more than if you would have earned a penny by just saving it.
Right, exactly. No, I love that, and honestly, that's a fascinating topic. We can jump to Web3 because I'm interested that that is one of your core, uh, mantras, right? Is the savings principle. Do you apply that to Web3? Because I find myself personally looking at ETH and stuff as almost funny money, and when I realized that, like, I just put zero point 0.2 ETH into what, and if I were to have that actual amount of money in my bank account, I would have fucking never done that, right? What do you find yourself struggling with that, or do you take that same mentality to Web3?
Because I had a scarcity mentality growing up, like being Asian, we had to save every little bit. I definitely don't see it as that because I don't even look at the number optics within it anymore. I like to
Right,
go look with like so Jack Ma of Alibaba, he likes to say that the amount of funds that we have today is based off of our community's trust in us, right? And that's the real currency. The attention, the trust, and then the value people put on you.
right, right. No, I love that, and I think that makes all the sense. As far as I'm interested in this too, because you said this a couple of times. Um, I'm obviously a white dude from the US, but you've mentioned Asian and being Asian and Asian background. Can you talk to me at all about that and influences growing up, advantages, disadvantages, anything you want to speak to about that?
To everyone that's listening, I would definitely say that like don't allow like that pressure to really get to you. Like that's actually what sort of led me to like my mental breakdown. It felt like nothing I did was good enough, right? It's
Mm,
just about understanding and accepting yourself for you.
I love that. I love that, and we're gonna get to that a little later on. I'm writing that note down because there's a whole kinda story in there of, like, how did you come to that? I have my own version, I can't wait to hear yours. So, okay, we've talked a lot about, the hood, the harder part, um, perseverance, discipline. I mean, again, your mom being single and trying to work her way through this, actually getting you to a nicer area with more opportunity. Let's talk about that phase of your life now. First thing you notice, you get bigger trophies, right? So, what are some other things that now that you've kind of made this transition and in your mind have had starting to get more opportunities? Talk to me about that experience. Anything that has resonated with you or stuck in your mind once you've made this transition?
Yeah, so once I made the transition, like it was hard because like it was a fight for an identity, right? Like I was trying to figure out who I was and like being a victim of your environment, you also begin to realize that it's now being much older, it's a mental framework that you have to sort of work through, right? It's not just being a victim to your environment, but knowing how to capitalize on the environment that you're in and navigating it to the best of your ability. So, I mean, I think that that transition was fairly hard, but like having more opportunities and being able to succeed at them, it was just like one step at a time to go through all of those processes. And it just became more and more accomplishments under my belt after that.
Right. Sorry about that, man. I turned YouTube
Very
on to
good.
just make sure it was working, and we heard double voices there. So as you're going through these things, right? You're obviously starting to get more accomplished. You're working at being presidents of these different clubs. How about like actual tangible skill sets? Was it math? Was it English? Like what were the things and skill sets that you felt like you were gaining as you're starting to go through this period of your life?
I would say math has always been a solid foundation to everything. Which I heard something quite interesting about the math portion of it is like for a lot of people that have harder childhood in life, they typically gravitate towards math and sciences because when their life they can't make sense of their life. It's just something that's more finite and like A equals B, and they just naturally gravitate towards math or sciences because it's something that always makes sense to in their mind.
Mm, that's interesting. And you felt like you fit into that kind of mindset then, huh?
Yeah, so it's just math. The skill set I would say that got built up is math, networking, and the ability to like convey your thoughts and navigate whatever it is that you're trying to do, you know?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think networking, obviously, that's what's one of the biggest things in Web3. People talk about the technology and the opportunity, but you look at the most successful people in this space, they know the right people. And unfortunately, there's a lot of very influential groups in the Web3 space that do a lot of horrible shit because, listen, at this day and age, and I'd love your insight on this because I still have not found an answer. uh, I have just very rarely seen a space, Web3 is a prime example, that you have people with good intentions. But once you get a group of people that have access to billions, hundreds of millions, even tens of millions of dollars, it seems like money, ego, and power always corrupts. What are your thoughts there?
Man, I hate to agree with you there, but it's also something that I've noticed. But like, I'm just someone that never sells out my character because like even in the Hive blockchain, I navigated it pretty highly. I ended up meeting some of the top people there, but like, so I had a huge argument against like one of the whales in Hive blockchain, and I just had to just do it, even though he had the millions of dollars to just downvote me to oblivion, right?
Right.
But I'm just always someone that wants to be historically correct, and like a legacy matters to me. So I'm not gonna suck up to somebody just off of like because I think it's an easier path to success.
Right. And it's one of the mantras that we have. So one of the pillars that we have that building up to like why we think our our mission statement, bringing back the lost art of genuine human connection. Like we are fascinated by people. We think genuine connection. These deeper questions that we're talking about here, opposed to like maybe what would happen on a space. And we built a company, right? And for a mission statement, you need to have values, right? And one of the values is uh, be kind, especially when it's hard, right? When somebody's being a dick to you, to respond with kindness is one of the hardest things to do in the world. And then again, to your point, when um, money's being tossed around, ego's being tossed around, and you've got these like very tangible things that society makes you feel like you're an awesome person if you get, one being wealth, but to turn that down because you know it's the wrong thing is literally one of the hardest things to do in life. So props to you, and I think that's incredibly important, and I think not enough people are doing it in the space. But one way that we talked about earlier that you saw from my last podcast is I'm actually firmly convinced, and this is kind of the same conversation, most nice guys finish last, right? It's just a product of life. You got to be cutthroat. You're not becoming a billionaire by being a nice guy. I'll tell you that much right now. Hence why I never want to be a billionaire. I know I don't have the mindset or the mentality to get $1 billion, nor do I need $1 billion. What who fucking needs $1 billion? Like, what do you do with that? Uh, but if we get enough people that are nice, that have the right intention, we can finish first. And I firmly believe that. And I think that's one of the huge opportunities in the nascent stage that we are in Web3. What are your thoughts about that?
No, I agree. Like, I think nice guys collectively can finish first because it takes perseverance, right? I think a lot of nice guys just end up getting burnt off. So they end up not being a nice guy anymore or taking a more jaded path. Whereas I think if you stay core to your principles, like it might not pay off right then and there, but you're going to start to notice this trickle in effect. Like for example, and say like one of the guys I wanted to make our community different, right? So like we brought in people to like sing like karaoke to create a certain vibe set for our group, our spaces and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
like one of the announcers ended up remembering me because I gave him a sponsorship in this Dragon City, Dragon Land or something like that in Ethereum earlier on. And he was like, I don't ever think I got those NFTs back, by the way. But like, yeah, I mean he remembered that. So like I think I think in time it does pay off as long as you
Yeah.
just stay core to your principles.
Yeah. And another thing that you kind of brought up, which I think is really important, is um, this back to this community thing, right? If you have the right minded people, it's almost like having a gym buddy, right? The gym is a lot easier to actually show up to if you have a counterpart that you're like, when you're sitting in bed and you're like, fuck this, I do not want to go to the gym. But you're like, well, I can't let my burrow mat down. And then you go. And it's the same way of with surrounding yourself with the right people. that have the right mindset. So when that business decision comes to say, hey, I will do this semi shady thing, but it gives me an extra 20 grand in the bank account. Do I do that or do I not do that? And you have that sounding board around you, which is super critical and important. Um, but it's so hard, man, especially in this space. I'm not going to lie. Me, which my brand is being genuine and doing the right thing and being kind every day. If you just get sucked into the Twitter sphere, you're like, fuck, man, I should have made $100,000 in the last month, or look at all these people that are making money. One, half that shit's fake. Uh, Two, most of the people that are doing that are probably not making the right decisions at the right time, majority of the time, right? But this space makes it very, very difficult. So fascinating, really good conversation. I had another question that I lost, but I will come back to that. So let's take through kind of high school. You've gone through, we've talked about the skill sets. We have a pretty good, I think, solid episode one there. Is there anything else in that time period that you want to share? Or do you feel like we did a pretty good job covering that time frame?
I think like throughout like besides like just like the scholastic activities, like I was big into like trading cards, right? Like I started really young. I would go to trade shows. I would be the kid that like sold candy, sold origami. I remember it still like with mechanical pencils, you could just put them between your shoe and pop off the top, and then you make a staple gun shooter. So like it just having sold all those goods, it just naturally helped me to gravitate towards trading cards because it was like something that was more tangible. And like I realized if I could get good at it, that I would know which cards were going to get good. So I would amass a large stockpile of those cards because it
Right,
wasn't like the internet like today, right? Like everyone's just net decking and looking up what the best deck were. Back
right.
then, you actually had to know what you were doing. You had to engineer the deck. You had to create it out from outright. So I think like it's just all been a great process in how I navigate even the space.
Right, and I think but that back to what you just said is that comes from that grind mentality, and then just going through the process of how economics and trading and buying and selling stuff works, which is a great foundation to have. But I will say this though, um, I suck at investing, man. Nor on top of it, do I really have any interest of day trading or running a bot on, OpenSea or whatever website it is to like make that quick flip. That just doesn't interest me. Never has. Flip side, my co-founder would spend 8 hours in Elder Scrolls Online's marketplace to make like a deal virtually, right? Like that's the type of mentality he had because that fascinated him. Me, I like to create content and I like to meet people, which is cool though, because I think there's so much, and it makes sense because you can make money, and all Web3 really is still investing based. Totally makes sense. I don't think there's enough conversation about how you can apply all of these varied skill sets to be successful in Web3. What are your thoughts there?
I don't think there's an exact roadmap to success. Like, so it's just like for me, like I actually used to be like a big trader. I mean, I still sort of am, but like I want to shift towards that because it doesn't feel good for me, right? Like it's sort of like as you know, like oh, you're a jeter if you sell. Or so
Right,
like when you're trading it, it almost feels like you're a constant jeter. And
right,
that's
right.
why like I sort of shifted focus to like brand building and networking and building quality relationships, right?
Right, right. And I think honestly, at the end of the day, it's more powerful because I would say, another I can tell you some of the loneliest people in the world are the people that didn't really cultivate their relationships, have a bajillion dollars in the bank account, are on their fifth marriage, and they're old and alone, right? Um, so listen, more power to you if that's what you want to do. But I am totally in agreement with you, and I've said this multiple times, and I say it on my Twitter, and it's a narrative I want to push forward. To me, the true innovation in this space is brand. It's brand 3.0. They call it Web 3.0, but for the first time, um, this sense of ownership, and you can debate. Uh, does an NFT give you true ownership of a company? You could debate that all day. But there's a feeling of ownership when you join a community and have an NFT. And you've never been able to do that before with a brand like we have in the Web3 space. And I think that's the true innovation, and the people that continue to utilize that and open new avenues or ideas on how to effectively utilize that are going to be the winners in the end. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I really like that thought because ultimately at the end of the day, it's really how you navigate yourself, right? And like,
Mm.
I think the idea of branding and what makes Web3 so interesting for me is that there's historical logs of everything, right?
Right.
So it's like, imagine if politicians were on Web3 and every little transaction or everything they did was somewhere stored on chain. They would be forced to be way more accountable to the
Right.
general public, right?
Hmm.
It's like, it's not what you're like, for me, it's not what you're saying, it's what your wallet is telling me also, right? Like,
Right.
you're telling me you're not a flipper, you're not a jeter, or like we're all gonna hold this coin strong, but then I see the token price like plummet. It's like, well, if only our group holds this token, you guys definitely didn't hold strong, and you pretty much cheated on me. You know, like
Right, right. And that's a fascinating. I've never even thought about it from that angle. But like again, if this technology, there's so many applications, right? And one of them can be kind of like social influence vetting, right? Like, are you a person of your word? And when it comes to, because more and more, we won't just be looking at it as an investing tool. We'll have deeds, we'll have licenses, we'll have all of these documents attached to the blockchain, which you really can start mapping a person's life with, right?
exactly.
And that really does then hold you accountable for the actions that you're taking. I love that angle, man. Where that's a great little short clip right there to just start up some online conversation. But yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think that's the true. The example that I always use in the past was like one of the few. It was really the first company to do it, which was a Web2 company, Red Bull, right? Like they created an energy drink, but they really turned their brand into this extreme lifestyle brand, right? And people bought Red Bull because they felt like they were part of a community and family of these like-minded people. And that is, in essence, what Web3 can do in so many different interesting ways. Thoughts there?
No, yeah, I love
Yeah.
it. I mean, it's
Okay.
just the history. Your history is what defines and make. It doesn't really define you, but it helps shape you to who you become.
Right, absolutely. All right, man. So let's move on to one of the more intriguing middle episode 2 parts. And again, I think it's the frame in the context of and we'll talk about the burnout, right? Let's get real about that, and I can tell you my personalities, but let's lead up to that burnout, like this crazy world of cards, right? One, school me on it a little bit because I'm interested in the process of like really getting into it, and what does that world look like, and what is it like to be at the top end of that world. And maybe take us through that period to like when you start having this kind of like breakdown. And as you take us through that kind of story, uh, things that you learned, again, wins, success, failures, like in that context would be helpful.
Yeah. So it started like quite young in middle school. Like I still remember like in order to buy like a Yu-Gi-Oh structure deck, you couldn't just buy it at your normal Walmart or Target, right? Like I remember still having to go to a store called Spencer's and being like a young kid walking into
Answers.
Spencer's. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like an adult themed store, right? So
Ah,
you can imagine how odd it felt. Like, and I was
to
saying, could
go
I
get a
borrow your structure deck?
Yu-Gi-Oh pack in Spencer's? Yeah, I thought Spencer's was just a bunch of, like,
Mhm.
random ass, yeah, scary goth shit.
Yeah, god shit, adult stuff. Yeah, so it
Yeah,
was very awkward navigating that like at a really young age. But when I realized I could buy the structure deck and sell a
yeah,
singular card in there and pretty much get back all of my money and I had all these other cards for free, that
right,
I guess that's when that aha moment like came into my head as a young kid.
right,
But now looking back, it's funny because there's only dark. So in Yu-Gi-Oh, there's Dark Magician structure deck and the Blue Eye structure, the Kaiba structure deck, right? And
right.
all I would see was the Yu-Gi-Oh one because I guess someone older than me probably went out and bought all the Blue Eyes ones because they already saw that monetization model from a young, like from their perspective, you know?
That's hilarious. Okay, so you get into the Yu-Gi-Oh ones, you're going to Spencer's as a young kid, which probably is not the most appropriate store. Talk about this manifestation. How does it expand? How does it explode? You're really interested into it just from the pure monetary value, but like take us through this journey.
So that's the funny thing, right? It wasn't actually because of the money value. It was more so like I had something that other kids like looked up to, or that they were like, "Oh, you have that." So that's what drove me, right? Because as kids, we don't
Interesting.
really like objectify money like that. Like, what's money? Money gets us the video game we want. Money gets us
Right.
the toy we want, the new shiny object, right?
Right.
So that's why, like in RuneScape, I held all these assets. I bought on my friends' accounts because they wanted the money. But for me, it felt good having something that like others looked up to in a way or wanted to have. And like,
Interesting. So it's almost like a form of credibility, or but there's a good feeling about having those things. I never thought about it that way. That's an interesting concept. So that really drove you to kind of keep on expanding. Anything else there?
yeah, I mean that I think that was the main drive because like I said, I grew up in the hood, right? So like and always like the scarcity mentality built into me.
Hmm.
So with like going there to a school where everyone had everything that they wanted, like
Right.
that's actually how I got my first Xbox. It was a modded Xbox too, because like I wasn't able to just buy these systems like other kids, right? Like so
Right.
like for me, I couldn't even buy booster packs because I felt guilty. My mom would be saying I was wasting money. So I
Right.
became really good at trading and playing the games so that I could theoretically afford like have like be printing packs at that point.
No, that makes total sense. And and again, it means to end in the sense that you're trying to acquire some of the things that you wanted. Were you also then layered on with just like extremely passionate about it too, or did you look at it more of like a credibility business type angle?
No, I mean, as a kid, I don't think we look at those things. I mean, or we really shouldn't. Like, it was more like the accolades. Like, I enjoyed winning all the time. Like, I think I won like 30 or 40 weeks straight in drafting as a kid, like beating all these grown adults. Like, that was a very accomplishing feeling for me.
Right. No, that makes total sense. So take us into your kind of 20s and in this kind of episode too, and how this is really evolving.
Yeah. So to tell you the truth, like I was all throughout like I was doing trading cards all throughout this, like traveling around the just Texas at that point, right? So I was
Right.
traveling around doing trading cards even when I was in school. So when I had my first like real breakup, like that really devastated me in college.
Right.
And like it really hurt and it really affected like how I viewed everything. And like, but that's when I realized like a aha moment went in my head. I was like, why am I paying all of this to get the education to go get a job when now as like someone in my early teens, like or not early teens, I guess I was like 18, 19 at the time, I'm already
Right.
making thousands of dollars at these trade shows. So
Right.
that's when I just said, okay, I need to just transition into this, and which I
Right.
did.
Right. And so talk to me about that business then. I mean, what did it look like to be able to make the thousands of dollars? Were you just constantly traveling day in and day out? Because at that time we're now talking um how long ago? Over a decade ago at this point?
Let's see, 2007. So yeah,
Okay.
almost 2 decades now.
So like what did the online ecosystem, was it a lot of still in person? Like what did the life of a hustling card person at that point look like?
Yeah, so online didn't really exist to where it did today, right? Like eBay was just lifted off, and
Right.
like not many people still like utilized it at the time, right? There was still like even before eBay, like people would use Beckett and Scry magazines to dictate the price. And that
Yeah,
magazine would like
Beckett.
gather, yeah, it would gather all of the store's data and then input the price of the card. So like because I was a gamer and I was good at the cards, I would trade for the cards I thought were undervalued by them using this magazine, right? Because I knew what
Right.
cards I wanted to acquire that I thought were better than the other ones. So I just I traded a lot of my cards into that. But the aha moment
Right.
was when people wanted to quit the game and I bought their collection, or like, let's say they switched from Magic to Yu Gi Oh! Or Yu Gi Oh! To Pokemon, and I had all of those cards at my disposal. I could be like that exchange, the median for everyone to just get into the game that they love without selling
Right.
out to a store and like getting pennies on the dollar, right?
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I love that. Okay, so you're physically, traveling to these cards Do you create your own company at this point? Or are you just kind of solo entrepreneuring, doing your own thing?
No, I actually didn't create because I didn't have the infrastructure to know how to do all those things, like, at a
Right,
younger age. Because
right.
like, my mom was just a hard worker all her life, right? So, like, for me, it was just about, like, buying up people's collections and then just selling it, and then it just building that off into a brand. It got to the point where, like, I still remember at one point, I was kicked out of, event because they thought I was the Japanese guy, which is a good friend of mine, Kyojin Hino, which
Yeah.
was going around buying up everyone's collections because 'cause you're not actually allowed to buy and sell at these conventions, right? Just yeah.
Oh,
And then when
gotcha.
I got kicked out, there's actually a line of people wrapped around my car, and, like, that's when, like, it just, like, it felt better, and I just continued on that spiral pretty much.
Gotcha. So take us through that, like, onto the spiral. Like you say you're doing really successful. You're going through your 20s. You're traveling to these shows. You're making money. You're making good money. You love you. I'm assuming like the culture. Like what was the culture like? Like it, are you making a lot of friends? Did you find a crew to kind of live this life with? Because it sounds like there was a lot of travel and a lot of moving around. What did that look like?
Oh, that actually brought me a point I wanted to bring up a little bit earlier. It's funny you say that. Like, when you talk about, like, being so successful and feeling alone, right? I would
Right.
actually challenge that objective in that, like, the day you feel the most alone is when you have a whole bunch of people there supporting you, but yet it feels like you're there alone still. And, like, that to me was the loneliest feeling. It's not
Oh,
having anyone,
wait, but, like, that let's maybe say that different or talk to me more about that. Like, how does
having
like
a bunch of people make you feel even more alone.
yeah.
Because then you don't know if they're there for you yourself or for what you have or the deals that you can provide them, or if you're gonna buy their collections better, or if you can introduce them to the next big person, you know?
So back to really the insight, what you're talking about this show, right? Is like it's these they're connections, but they're connections and they're interested in you to help them get one up. It's not a genuine, real connection. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, because like, I think I was a bit naive when I navigated the ecosystem, like, I was all
Mhm.
about, like, because I would read all these, like, inspirational books, YouTubes, and stuff like that, so, like, I would always, like, connect people to each other,
Right,
thinking, like, that's gonna make us a much bigger brand, but, like,
right.
now, like, they're all, like, you'll realize that it's a very cutthroat ecosystem, and then they'll pretty much just one up you, or like, if you teach someone how to trade, they're no longer going to sell you their collection versus just become another version of you, right?
Right, right. And so how did you deal with that?
I mean, I was fortunate that I had a big name, and so like that helped by always getting the people. But then it started to feel really guilty, because like ultimately when you're trading, there's a winner and a loser, even if you're providing the best value. So that's what ended up like leading to my mental breakdown a little bit, because a quote that I still remember from my ex was, "Unrealistic expectations leads to feelings of failure." And I think that like I had all these expectations, and like I was networked with some of the top gamers in the world, like Adam Garcia, a kid that I saw like grow up, like he ended up being the number one ranked Pokemon player in the world. Philly Luna won like 5, 6 championships at that time, which is unheard of in Yu-Gi-Oh! And
Right,
like a lot of my friends were like platinum pros and stuff for Magic the Gathering, you know. So
right,
it definitely there, and I've beaten all of them like multiple times too, and it just it definitely, it's those expectations that I think led to like the so-called crash.
right. And so before we talk about so-called crash, or maybe it even makes sense to segue into this, but so the unrealistic expectations totally get. Um, were those driven by just making more money or again that credibility feel good feeling or just a product of your upbringing like we talked about? Where do you think that came from?
That's a really good question. And the funny thing is like I never actually really like monetized it. I know it sounds weird because like like I still remember when Kyojin Hino like emptied out ATM, and that was the first time I've ever experienced something like that. It's like we went to the ATM multiple times. I was buying cards for my friends to sell to him, and like that was like a wow moment for me. Like that's when I realized that like what I should have done looking back was I should have pulled the guy aside, not introduced him to all my friends, and then established that network versus like hold that network for myself, right?
Right, right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Um, Looking back, so that's one of them. Is there anything that you would have done different to kind of circumvent these unrealistic expectations you put on yourself? Or do you think that is was just part of your natural learning process and kind of wouldn't change that?
I, that's a really, really hard question because obviously if I didn't teach a lot of those people, I think my road and journey would have been a lot easier.
Right,
But honestly, I don't. It's hard. I was gonna say I don't regret it, but in a way, I slightly do.
right.
Hmm.
Talk to me about the regret part.
Well, it's because back then you have to realize like it wasn't as fluid as everything is now. You can't just go to a TCG player, eBay, Amazon, and have all these analytics in front of you, right?
Right,
So like I had to like teach people how to navigate that. Like the idea of buying someone's collection, being able to buy list all of the good stuff away, and like breaking even was a great thing for me. And I tried to tell people that and they didn't really understand it because I told them, imagine this, if you bought a collection and you're able to break even with 70, 80% of it, you're still left with the 20% of that collection that you
right,
could build up. So like that's why like I never really fully monetized it because of the whole like rule of 72, Einstein's rule of 70. In business we call it the rule of 72 because it once you divide by it, it tells you like how money compounds, right? So
right,
that's why every time I would sell a collection, I would automatically already have a collection to buy.
right.
So the only thing I would do differently was actually monetize it more to where like I could actually know how much I'm bringing in, and then I think that would have given me the confidence to continue further.
Right. Okay. Now that makes sense. And I think let's get to kind of the next step, which is where it all kind of fell apart. Go into as much detail as little detail as you want, but I am always interested in failure stories and how people get back up because it's and I say this a lot, to repeat your failure story and then how you got back up and now listen, you're a founder of a web3 project and you're still putting the one foot in front of the other. Your story, as even in just the basic difference of you're Asian and I'm not, right, is going to resonate with somebody in such a different way when they watch this online in the future than my story would. So I love the fact that even though we talk about a lot of the same principles on this show, especially from podcast to podcast, because there's no arguing, there are uh, common themes to success, common themes to failures, just common themes to life. But how you describe your story is going to resonate with somebody different. So I'm so excited to kind of go down this path. But again, don't share anything you don't feel comfortable sharing.
No, it's fine. I think the biggest downfall for me was my ego. Like because I was always like searching for like that validation, right? Like that's what made me president of all those organizations. But even at that level, it felt like, why can I be more like this kid? Why can I be more like this person's son? Right. And like
Mm,
behind that culture of things. So like I was always stuck to always compare against all of these other people. So like that's why I always had like this massive competitive nature. And I think like that was probably one of my biggest downfalls because when you're in something like trading cards, I mean, even sports or anything like that, there's always and in Web3, there's always this battle of ego going on, right?
right,
And
right,
I and I think like so Facebook probably played a major role in this because like I said, because of being in that school setting and like leading all those organizations, to see all of my peers like end up going to work for Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. One of the guys was actually my Troy Wolfold. He was actually on TI's Grand Hustle, and he was the
right,
guy that didn't get kicked out, but he left because he had a baby. So like by navigating and watching Facebook like that, it led to me like, what did I do with my life, or what made my life so much different when I was leading all of these individuals? And I think that's what caused that like the house of cards to crumble, as if you will.
right. So again, you're it's this combination of ego, but I've heard this theme throughout the whole time is this constant like you're just comparing yourself to other people. And like you said, again, in Web3, it is so difficult to do this. And I think it is a lesson for anybody in life that like it's life is so much better if you can somehow close that off, right? There obviously you need ambition. Obviously you want to compare yourself to what you think success, and you need to define success for you, right? Um but if I see somebody, and I actually, how I circumvent this thought for me, is, and I do this a lot of times, right? I think to myself, and I even tweet about this, is, oh, if I just had 100,000 followers, I would be that much more further ahead. But then I think to myself all the time, there's many people with hundreds of thousands of followers that don't have a mission statement, that don't have a unique value proposition like I do with this podcast, and a unique angle that no one else has in the space. And that's the important part, right? The rest will come if you can figure out what you're really trying to strive after. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and I think that's a great thought to have, right? Because it's like it's all about foundations, right? Because I didn't set up the right foundation and expectations for myself. That's what
Mm,
allowed the house of cards to crumble. Whereas
right,
now I wouldn't even go about comparing anymore, right? Like if you're gonna compare, you should compare to the person you were yesterday, right? So if you're always a better person than you were yesterday and you follow along that metric, you're always going to be able to improve. So like through your network, like through all these people that you feel that have the success, you
right.
just need to reverse engineer what they did, and if it's something that aligns with their value proposition, to follow along through that, right? And
Yeah.
that's yeah, and I think like that's probably one of the biggest things you can do.
Nah, man, and that was just, dude, beautifully said. I totally agree. Oh, gotta give Buzz a shout out. Buzz is one of the longtime OGs, just chimed in chat. Um, One thing that I think is interesting though, and I love your thoughts on this, is there's this juxtaposition, kind of like yin and yang thing, or balance. And I'm firmly convinced you get out of balance for too long, you're doomed to fall apart. Not saying that, like, for instance, I've had, and I was talking to you about this yesterday about the lack of sleep and stuff. I had Dex, who's one of the owners or co-founders of Phantom Network, back when Phantom Network was like the most hyped. Dude, Phantom Network at the height had, and I saw like he became good buddies, and he shared his like social analytics. It was fucking mind blowing what they were doing on Twitter, the fervor that they caused, because of this. And so this guy was sleeping 4 hours a night for a year straight. This guy was working 20 hours a day, and that he ends up collapsing in his apartment, right? And so balance, you have to stay in balance at some point. You cannot be unbalanced forever. Um, and what I'm getting at here is, how, in your mind, looking back, do you balance that moment in your life now that you know what you know? Because to be great, you have to have an ego, right? And it's really difficult to not be great or at the top of your game without that ego. So now going through all of this, knowing that ego was one of your downfalls, like, what do you look at from this aspect of balance, or how people that are in that similar situation, what would your advice be to them?
So this is one thing that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, right? And it's like I think the idea of ego is like I don't think that it's bad. And like without going into like the whole conspiracy nature of my life and how things played out, I would just say like humility is always key, but like there's nothing wrong with a solid ego, right? Like I don't think anyone would have said like Solomon, like from biblical terms, had a huge ego, right? I
Right.
mean, he probably did, but you're just not going to reference someone like that. Like everyone's going to say the same or not of Elon Musk, right? You have to have the ego or the confidence, I should say, to know that you shouldn't be comparing yourself with other people. You just shouldn't use it in a way to say like I'm better than you. right? It's just
Right.
about improving yourself. Like that's the competition. It shouldn't be
Right.
in comparison to other people, but to be a
Right.
better person you are today than you were yesterday. I think like that needs to be the framework.
Yeah, and I love it, and that's another clutch, dude. Already so many great little tidbits coming out of this podcast. It'll be great to share with everybody. And the way you said it is just yet another interesting way, which is ego is good. How you interpret your ego is what makes the difference, right?
Yeah.
Which is another just beautiful way to say that. So, so ego is starting the downfall. Anybody else, anything else there on, that time period, things that you want to share about what you would have done different, lessons learned other than ego? Anything else to share there?
I wouldn't trust too early. Trust should be earned, not just given. I think you should give people like some basis of trust, but only like you sort of have to treat it like a meme coin, which is odd to say, right? Like you have to put it in knowing that it could potentially go to zero. And if you're okay with that and it won't affect you, then that's the level of trust you should be giving a lot of these people. But like that's what's so beautiful about the blockchain to me is because when you look at someone's history, their wallet, their Discord activity, and other Discords, it starts to allow you to like sort of like gauge who they are as a person. Like Swifty that commented, "Let's go Zomsies." Like that guy is such a great member in the Say ecosystem of Satoshi. Like he really puts out that effort. Like he's coming through here. He's coming through AMAs. So there's these little details and tidbits that you're able to start to recognize who the real ones are. Who's going to support you when you have nothing? Who's going to support you for you and not what you can be or the name that's behind you?
Right. No, and I love that this whole trust thing. And so putting it in the Web3 founder perspective, we're just still jumping a little bit ahead, but I think this is interesting to me. How do you interpret trust as a founder? Because, like, for instance, right, you're not fully doxxed on this show, but I don't. People, I think, have this weird interpretation of like, if you're not fully doxxed, then I can't trust you. But you're on talking about your life and very intimate experiences. That's doxing to me, right? But how do you, as a founder, what do you think about when you're trying to say, I need to earn the community's trust, and I'm going to do it by doing what?
Okay. I'm really glad you stated that because my co-founder Byron, he is fully doxed. I mean, so but like in terms of me personally, Infinity TCG, you can go and look at my wallet. Like so, for example, when I first started my journey into crypto, I know that's like episode 3, but like in a way, like
No, it's all good, man.
yeah, like for Splinterlands, I put like $500-600 into the guild, and at that point, like it was about a third of all my holdings. I didn't really fully trust crypto yet at this time.
Right,
So, but like when I decided to leave because of the huge debacle I had with like one of the whales there, I decided to give the guild away. So like by looking through the history, I mean they can go like you can even go on like Oni. Like I don't know if you remember Oni as an
yeah.
early ETH project. Nameless. I was one of the earliest nameless. So if you go on the Oni server and you type in
Oh,
Infinity TCG, you'll see that even after I got my early 2 mints, I was the one still fighting for the community, telling them that they should keep it at the structure, only allow 1 to 2 people to mint. That way they could broaden out their ecosystem. They would have had one of the biggest bases and they probably would have been the strongest brand. But they saw the hype and then they wanted the quick money, so they took
right.
that exit. And look
Interesting.
where
No,
they're at.
yeah, no, I think that's interesting to the doxing part about, again, like you're using the blockchain to, like, your history really is on there. I agree with you that, but as far as taking the doxing out of it, again, back to the bigger question, how in your mind do you think it's effective for a founder to earn the community's trust? What does that look like to you?
I think it's through execution, right? Like that's why we're starting out as a free mint. And not only that, like the royalties that we receive through it, it's all going to be sustained within the ecosystem. You're not going to see me send the money into Binance because I'm fortunate enough that I'm a decent trader on these other platforms. So my co-founder, obviously as an artist, they're all looking to get paid, right? Like you're
Right.
drawing, they want to show and create their art, but ultimately they wouldn't be in Web3 if they weren't trying to monetize it in some way. but
Right.
I'm fortunate enough to where I can take care of them through the back end and then keep that building there for the community to see that we don't need this exit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, absolutely. And I think execution is that. What are your thoughts on this? I talk to this often, and why do you think this happens? And this is the crazy phenomenon that happens in Web3. In traditional investing, if I lived in the Bay Area near Silicon Valley, and there's obviously tons of venture capitals there, right?
Yeah.
You go in, you do your pitch deck, and they're like, "Infinity, I love your idea. I believe in you. I'm going to invest in you." They then give you the money, and they do everything in their power to make you successful. Whereas in Web3, it's the opposite. They give you the money, and the instant you screw up, they do everything in their power to destroy you. What are your thoughts there? Why? Any insights? Any thoughts around that?
See
Crazy theory.
But see, I think that's where a lot of projects are like they're promising all of these things and making an ask, right? Whereas I think that the actual best steps to success, because it's trust is so hard to build on this ecosystem. If you're
Right,
going for a brand, you should just deliver, deliver, deliver. And the
right,
more you're able to under promise, over deliver, that's how that trust gets built over time. Like that's why we tell people it's just going to be a simple art project about based on community and building out, but we already have a lot of back end plans. We've already have stuff built up, and we're already talking to various relationships to bring that value proposition in. But
yeah,
it's about not promising those things and showcasing them, you know?
right, right. No, absolutely, and I think that's the absolute right way, and that is an appropriate. But still, back to the one thing that we just talked about that doesn't answer it is why do Web3 people feel the need to destroy the one thing they have money invested in? Why is
Because
that?
because I think it's like in Web3, there's just a lot of highly intelligent people, right? So we now face like this battle of ego thing. And that's one of the things that I've started to learn. And like instead of like spending my time and energy on those things, it's better just to navigate it towards people that are wanting to build something meaningful with you, right? Because
Right,
it's like you could because as long as your direction like like disaligns with the people that are so-called investing in you, then they feel like, oh, you're not exactly like aligned with them, so they want to bash you for this or bash you for all of these inconsistencies, right? So it's like that's why it's like, I think it's ultimately, like I said, I think it just comes down to their ego in the space, and I think that's
yeah,
something that's gonna take time to change because
yeah,
it's a lot of instant gratification, right?
yeah,
Because if you buy something, it needs to go to 2 or 3x or you're a failed project. And
yeah,
that's why we don't release everything in our roadmap, right? Like, we have all of these things already built out, already have them, but we rather slowly deploy them because if you build that out, they expect you to churn it out. Like, they expect you to be like this super machine that has like all these teams and just keep pumping it out.
right,
Whereas if you just deploy it in a more strategic way, right? It's like a premium content producer. Just because you have all of these ideas, all of these things that you want to launch onto your podcast, make a tweet about, it's sometimes the best strategy is to spread that out over the course of a couple of weeks to
yeah,
where you'll have quality content layered out.
yeah. And it's yeah, it's beautiful what just happened here, man. That's why we asked the questions, right? We had a really interesting and got your interpretation on what ego meant to you, and ego is a really good reason as to why I think the community acts the way they do, and is a good way to explain what the hell is going on. So it came full circle, and we wouldn't have had that context before. So no, I like that. I think again, that's just a really interesting way of explaining it. And I do think it is I think the community aspect is a beautiful thing of web3, but I also think it's one of the things that hurts it as well, right? It's because you have again back to the Valley analogy, there's only a small group of people that you're really answering to, but we know all how groupthink works, and you just get a couple bad actors in that Discord, and you got a couple thousand people. They're just going to latch on to that immediately, and that just explodes in such a quick amount of time. So the community is also something that can hurt you in the long run as well. And I think that's why you see a lot of these. people that believe in DAOs and, oh, we'll collectively make a decision. That shit just doesn't work, man. Like if you have 1,000 people trying to make a collective decision, how do you even do that, right? So there's been modifications to how people are using using these communities and brand 3.0 and web 3. And again, back to what we said earlier, I think it's someone's got to find the middle ground and find how to effectively use these tools. And I don't think we're there yet. We don't proven by what we're talking about. I'm going to give you money and then openly tear you apart. And you might as well light your money on fire, right? It doesn't make sense. Does not make sense at all. Any other thoughts there? Or are you ready to move on?
Mm, I would just say like it's sort of like politicians, right? Like we elect politicians. Like if you expect like a 1,000-person DAO to succeed, it's gonna be really hard because everyone's gonna have varying ideas. Whereas you should just like it's like validator nodes, right? Like we're putting our trust into certain validators to where they can have a bigger say. And I think that's how a lot of DAOs or a lot of infrastructure should be set.
Right,
If you don't trust the project or the founding team, then you shouldn't put your trust in them. Like we shouldn't just degen thinking everything is going to 2 to 3x when
right,
a lot of these things don't have proper foundations.
right, right. No, absolutely. Um, I had a thought and now I lost it. All right. Oh, it might come back up. Let's move on to episode 3. Actually, the one last thing is I'm interested in. So we talked about the ego, there's trust. Uh, all of this culminates in like really high expectations and starts a downfall, right? What do you think helped you get out of that and kind of start moving on? Because I think the redemption story, the changing around is always really, really important to talk about as well.
And this is gonna be a little okay.
And again, do
No,
not
no, it's
share.
fine. No, it's fine. I, so I was in a really, really depressive state, and I was
Right.
just like watching a lot of like motivational videos, like reading a lot of things. Seven Habits of Highly Effective People is probably one of the books I would recommend to anyone, especially like having
Isn't
kids.
that Covey? Did he
Stephen
write
Covey,
that?
yep.
Yeah.
Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah.
Yep. Great book.
Yeah, there's still one story I'll never forget in there, and it was about like whenever he bought like this person like a new shoes, and then they pulled off the tag, and he pulled off the tag. He was like, why were they so upset and crying? And then they got explained. It was because they never owned anything new, so that tag was a semblance of something. So
Right.
we always have to think about perspective, and that's sort of one of the things that like got me out of my rut because I list it was I know he's a little bit of a controversial character in Web3, and that's actually what got me to Web3 was Gary Vaynerchuk or Gary V, right?
I
Which
love me some Gary V. He's over the top, super abrasive, but his principles are sound.
yeah, and he honestly he saved my life
Dude,
because
that's
like
awesome.
yeah, just hearing his content, just saying about like you we have to think about the perspective of everything, right? Like for example, like my mom couldn't tell me that I was successful because that's not how she was raised. Her
Right.
parents probably didn't tell her or give her a like kudos to the things that she did well. So
Right.
like and then like I remember one of the hard subjects for me was like why don't we hug each other or tell each other I love you, right? And it's like, well, my mom never did that. So all of this is a metric of perspective. And until you know and get to the root of the problem or make those meaningful asks, you don't really you don't know what you don't know. Like we don't know what they lived through. We didn't know that that was their precedence. We just thought that that's how family should be because if
Right.
we're in America and we're noticing it in other people's lives,
Right.
why don't I have that?
Right. Yeah, dude. It's you gave me chills, and I was gonna say this, and you kind of already said it, but I can still like thoughts on this is when I got to my rough spot, and I'm firmly convinced this is one of the processes that needs to happen for healing. Um, and some people go through their whole lives and unfortunately don't do it, which really sucks. But I vividly remember the number one thing that that turned me on, like, okay, this is like ground zero, and now we can move forward, was when I had that conversation in the mirror, and I had a list of 25 things as to why I felt the way I did, why my life shouldn't be the way it did, and then I finally got to the bottom of the list, and this time, I've done this 1,000 times before, but for some odd reason, this time, I realized, "Oh, shit, it's me," right? It's not any of these other things, right? And then until I figure this out, nothing's gonna change. What are your thoughts there? Did you have a similar epiphany?
Yeah, and it's me. It's you should always put it on the individual because ultimately that's what you can control.
Mhm.
But I would say don't stop striving. If you're in that downward moment or in your life where you feel like everything is hopeless,
Right,
look out. I mean, because we live in the day and age that we live now, there's content about everything. And
right,
you'll be able to find somebody that's gone through what you've gone through or something similar. And I know like when you're in that spot, you're going to think to yourself, "Oh, they just don't understand. They didn't have to live through this. They didn't have
right,
to live like this." But it's not about that exact scenario. It's about looking and taking all of the little gems, the diamonds in the rough, the little
right.
things that can help you potentially navigate through that.
Yeah. Dude, beautiful conversation. I knew we were gonna get here, and I knew we were gonna talk about this, and it's good to know that you, recognize this, and again, Gary Vee is actually an influence to me because something magical that happened about a couple of weeks ago is I had, there's this project on youth called DSK DAO. This guy, Blue, uh, really good founder, really good guy from Canada, just like we're vibing out here, a lot of the similar mindsets and interesting stories. Someone, random on the internet watched the podcast and left a comment and said, "Hey man, I was addicted to drugs and alcohol when I was younger. And if I had like a couple people in my life like you that had these mindsets, like things could have been different, but I'm still happy that I met you." Right. And to your point, um, finding those people and just continuing to try to find those people, like we talked about earlier, uh, that resonate with you. That's the hard thing, right? Like like all day long, you're on Twitter or social media, and they're like, if you do X, Y, Z, you're going to be happy. And it's like, well, no, that's not the case. You need to find out what works for you. And that is so critically important. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and it might be hard, it might feel impossible, but just know
Mhm.
the world is a really big place, right? There's
Right.
Reddit, there's Discord, there's Twitter. I mean,
Uh-huh.
there's something out there that will resonate with you.
Yeah.
You might have to look a lot harder depending on your scenario, but there's something out
Shit, man. We've gone through a journey here, brother, and we need to get to Web3 because I want to do your Web3 person in your project. I'm going to call it a company, Justice. Uh, I like I said in the beginning, I immediately gravitated one to you because you were thoughtful. You had meaningful things to say in a Discord. It wasn't just like, "Yo, bro, wag me."
there.
2, the artwork I think is super, super cool. It's different. Um, and then 3, it's part of Say. I'm really interested in Say. I think it has good potentials if we can keep the types of people like us at the forefront, help lead and grow this together. Listen, once money really starts coming in, inevitably, like we said, there's going to be some things to deteriorate. But if we can get some of the right people in the place in the beginning, which is right now, we could do some special things. Um, so let's talk about before we get to zombies. And by the way, how are you pronouncing that? Because I don't even know how. Huh?
Yeah, we sort of like took a play because everyone was having say in their name because we built it
Right.
like 2 months ago, right? But
Yeah.
notice like I'm such a weirdo with numbers. I had to add an S at the end of it just to get
Yeah.
it to 8 characters, right? Because
Ah,
infinity is 8 characters, and I like
I,
everything.
okay. Okay. I got you. So before that, anything like and I always, dude, I don't know. I'm a boomer, man. I'm 42. Like I'm older than most people I talk to. I guess I'm not technically a boomer. I was born on the last year that I am a millennial, but I feel like a boomer. I have to literally too long TLDR. I literally have to say that in my head to make sure I say the acronym right because I want to say TDLR.
Yeah.
Give us the TLDR of your entry into Web3, and then we can have the meat of the conversation about zombies and the evolution of that.
So Gary Vee was my entry into Web3 because he was talking about crypto a lot, and being a card gamer that I was, I gravitated toward Axie Infinity, which led to Gods Unchained, and yeah, to Splinterlands, and then Splinterlands led me to Wax, which I found Warsaken, and yeah, here I am now.
And so, are you still active in the Wax ecosystem?
Yeah, I'm always there. Like, so I have a lot of founders in my DMs, and I always like help navigate or guide them, or just like bounce ideas. That's actually where I met my co-founder for Zomsays,
Okay.
because I was looking on Say, looking for like what's something different. Like I realized that it lacked an art perspective early on, because if you scrolled on Palette like two months ago, it was just a bunch of like pixelated art or like
all pixel art.
yeah, uh, art that didn't fit my style. I'll just put it that
Right.
way. Yeah.
Right. And now we've got the AI meta, which there are some good AI stuff, but it's still a lot of pixel art. Talk to me real quick though about I don't know much about Wax. Benefits, drawbacks. What do you like about it? Just in general about the Wax ecosystem.
So I'm a really community first type of person. So like
Mhm.
whenever I navigate all these things, the reason why I chose Wax was because my thought process was anyone that's willing to build in an ecosystem where it's not monetizable, like or it's not like as
Mhm.
highly monetizable, are like real builders. They're
Right.
building because the infrastructure is there, and that it's also relatively cheap. It's a proof of stake model. Granted, it feels a little less decentralized, but I think ultimately like the people that are building there are going to be some of the realest builders. Like one of the games I own like a five figures worth of assets all in that game. Like I
Wow.
own over 300 mint number eights. Yeah.
What's the game?
Warsaken.
Warsaken.
But I
Wow.
don't like how they're navigating the community. Like they haven't been as transparent and they made a lot of poor decisions. But
Right.
that's
Right.
another story. Yeah.
But in general, you feel like the people that you've met on Wax are more about the building and actually have businesses that they're trying to create opposed to just the whole flip mentality. Is that what you're saying?
There's always going to be those flippers, but
Right.
yeah, I think some of the people there that I found are like some of the more like wholesome people, and that's actually what got me to say, because we originally was just looking for an opportunity, but like when you start networking to like some of the builders here, like they're all willing to collab and work with you and then actually like talk to you. Like I've
Right.
talked to a lot of the safe founders. Like when we were a group of just 80 to 90 people in our Discord, they were all individually invited by me, and it was like
Right.
15 of them were safe founders,
Yep.
bunch of like DAO VC members, founders.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember even when I found you originally, I think it was pretty small, and I immediately again, I felt the sense of you were interested in the right way. Like I could just, I don't know. It's weird to say, and I think people have said this to me too, and I'm sure you've heard this too. But some people can just exude kind of generosity or caring through a computer screen, right? And
Yeah.
whether it's the how you use your words, there's you can create a sense of excitement through typing, believe it or not. And I felt that with you, and that's it's not it's very very rare do I go into a random Discord, have a conversation with the founder, and I'm like, you know what? I need to talk to that guy. And you were one of them. So props to you in that vein of like, dude, I felt comfortable and I felt welcome, and I appreciate that, man.
Thank you. We try our best.
No, absolutely. I think you're doing a good job. So okay, so you found Say, you're really liking the vibe. I've liked the vibe as well too, because a lot of the founders are easily accessible. I've already met, I've had Simply on, I've had Trips from Alive, we have Sold, we've had you. I'm working on Ray from Doms. He's a little tougher one, but I'm gonna get him. And it's been really easy to just have these natural conversations, and it's been great. So talk to about the manifestation of the project. Like, where did this brainchild come from? You're finding a blockchain. You've been on Wax. Take me through that journey.
Yeah. So as I said, we were looking on Palette. I was looking on Palette, and I was trying to figure out something that was a little bit different to create a brand because I sort of got tired of just playing the chase, like going to all these projects, getting to know them, and then like I don't really like the idea of, oh, once everyone got whitelist, the mint date, and then the Discord goes dead. Like
Right.
that's why I decided to look on Wax to try to find like a artist that I could reach out to that would pull in something different. And that's when I met my co-founder Byron. And the
Right.
reason I decided to strategically make him my co-founder is because I really liked his story, and I liked what I do is I put in my due diligence, right? Like I'll look on the Discord when Wax wasn't doing as well, and he's still responding to all the people. So that consistency is key. Like that's where I say like I think nice guys can finish first. They just have to be able to meet each other at the right time and right place to be able to
Yeah.
navigate through that. Because if a nice guy meets a bad guy and gets burnt off, then maybe he isn't as nice of a guy as he thought he was, or
Right.
he sort of starts to shift and get a little jaded, as I call it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so what was that process of just because I think this is a good tidbit. I'm assuming so you didn't know Byron before, but you're like, I like Wax. I need an artist. Like, what is that like actual process of like, I need to find an artist, and you went out and found one? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I actually did know Byron before. Like, I'm actually one of
Okay.
like the top, like I'm one of the top collectors in two PFP projects there. So I've already been like on the collector side of things, and like trying to support people. And then like as I keep hearing them like delay releases or like not execute on things, I started feeling some type of way. So I took a big step back.
Right.
But when I found Byron, his art really spoke to me because it was different, and the only zombie type project that was sort of there in the ecosystem at the time was XPX, which they're more navigating towards a game. But not
Okay.
only that, his art was hand drawn, and that there wasn't enough hand drawn, if any, that
Right.
existed on the Wax chain. So I
Right.
knew that that was a narrative that we could direct and really create in a meaningful way.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And again, that's why I was immediately drawn is one, it was different. I liked the combination of the hand drawn, and he's obviously, I think, using some type of Photoshop or other programs to do the colorization part of it, which is it just looks dope. And then you've shared, um, some of his early drawings, which were interesting too. So now take us through when did you start the Discord? What Actually, this is how I usually do it, and I'll put you on the spot, and it's okay if you don't answer this perfectly, uh, but you got 2 minutes or less. Give me the elevator pitch. Why should I spend my hard-earned money? I already know why I should spend it with you as a human because
Mhm.
you're grounded and you've got the right principles. But why should I spend my hard-earned money on says? I'm gonna say that right because of what you're trying to build.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, like my co-founder Byron has been drawing since 1991. Not only that, but like we're both really passionate people that have built through the bear market. A lot of people don't have that grit to showcase to you guys. And the thing is that if you already have a history of people just giving away value and just pretty much showing that they put the community first, why would you not trust in them? Not only that, like we're building a lot of back-end relationships to where we could be like sort of a white label service to where there's a lot of talented tech people in the space, right? But if we create like artwork for them, like let's say Wales community over at Ruben, who's the founder there, and we help you with the art side of things, they're more likely to give us their tokens, and that's ways we can reward our members, and also like we could tell a story through comic books, which is Byron's passion, and that's one of the things I want him to live towards is his passion. So we're gonna make a comic book that relates to the Say ecosystem, and not only that, we could pretty much like let people know and like sort of direct them into various directions and tell a narrative of all of these projects and what they mean to the ecosystem or to be educational and entertainment purposes.
Dude, I love it. I already have an educational platform idea. We're totally gonna figure it out with Byron. We even talked about some other things. Stay tuned, people. I think I think that's great. And I think how I interpreted that to really kind of condense all of that down is you're an artwork incubator for say.
Let me see. I don't want to show myself.
I was gonna say, you dude, you're not doxing, and now you got the
So
you
like
got
a lot of people know Charizard, but you mentioned Gary Vee, so I had to show you this. This
oh
is
yeah,
oh,
his V friend.
10. It's a sticker. So that one's a population 1 when I bought it.
Right.
But it's called Hype Horse,
Uh-huh.
ironically, because I know like this ecosystem is based on hype, right?
Right. Right. No, I love it. That's fantastic. So is this right when I condense down what you said? Basically an artwork incubator through for say through storytelling.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. That's fantastic. Okay, so what does the whatever you can divulge through mint date, mint price, how are we still got OG spots? We still got whitelist spots? How's this all working?
Yeah, so the mint date has not been determined yet because right now, obviously, we're analyzing the marketplace. So we're actually ready to launch. Like we could launch tomorrow if we wanted to. But the idea is that we want to hold off on it to time it better with the market. But here in a week or two, I might just say, let's just launch and just keep building and showing you guys what we can do. Because I
Right.
understand people in this patience is a very hard thing in this space and
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah.
Our mint price is free. Unfortunately, I promised it free because like that was the meta and that was what everyone was sort of preaching for.
Right.
And I'm sort of already like regretting that decision because we could have just launched at 888 and sold out at 1015, say, and then like had funds to bring on devs and navigate it.
Right.
But I think when you're going the brand route, when you make a promise, you have to stick to it all the way through. And if that doesn't show you about our character, like we're already putting in like you could tell by our artwork, we have over 200 traits and these are hand-drawn traits that get put online to get rendered. So yeah, so it'll be free. The supply is 50-50, but like that might actually drop down depending on the market sentiment. Like we're navigating everything pretty strategically, right? Like we still haven't done collabs with say Central, we haven't done it with Saiyans, WeBump, Colony, and I could have easily gotten those collab through. But the thing is, number one, I need to talk to them with the like allocation that they want because I want this to be a diversified thing and it shouldn't just be like, oh, because you own it, you should have all of those things because I don't think that's sustainable for long-term growth. So like
Right.
once we accept those collabs and all of those people flow through, you have to have events already ready. You have to have announcements. You have to have engaging things that like they're like, oh wow, this is your project. And but we have to navigate in a meaningful way to not create all of this hype prior because then it leads to a lot of people that could just cheat on the community and then just take a much bigger cash out. So I'm not even launching a roadmap till 2 to 4 days after, even
I
though it's
love
already
it.
made.
I love it. And so this brings in the the question that all founders or people that are creating a project or Web3 company have to answer. And it's how do you want to build? Uh, you can build quick by doing the collaboration route, but then you get, like you said, a lot of jeeters and you're left with a very empty community. I think you're taking the right, and that would be my advice of all the founders that have come on the show. If you are comfortable, and I mean, listen, everybody got to get paid, everybody wants to make money. But if you have that long term vision, like my buddy that has been building DSK down for, he's been building for almost 3 years, man. But he has a small collection, it's 222. But I guarantee you this, those 222 people will almost die for that man. And that is such a different vibe than getting some money up front and then trying to figure it out. So I commend you for that. I think it's the right move. And again, don't let the ego get in the way, right? Do it for the right reasons. And I think I'm happy to hear you say that.
Yeah.
So we have been talking for almost an hour and a half, brother, which is amazing because it's felt like 15 minutes to me. Uh, I think I want to do this. We'll do the next kind of future. What is the, or before that, is there anything else that you want to share about the project or or company? Do you feel like you have it covered? We talked about the artwork. We talked about the your concept of why you're going to mint the way that you're going to mint. Anything else there that you want to share?
Yeah, I think the main emphasis should be put on like this comic book approach because not only does that allow Byron to live out his dreams, I think it creates a really unique narrative brand that we can push forward. Because if we involve the SEI ecosystem, like we talk about Cosmarch and like their doxing service, right? Like we give them an outlet to where they have content and it helps educate the consumer base. But not only that, we could talk about like Dobbs Colony being the first PFP, just telling SEI's journey in a comic book form, I think is is definitely a very powerful brand move, especially because I'm in the trading card world. We
Yeah.
can easily make it physical and brand out that exposure.
Right. No, I love it. I mean, you're doing, I don't know if you've seen the Project Neighbors pop up, but they have an interesting take as well. They're more on the education news front. But again, kind of storytelling brand play. I like the angle of taking it to like explaining the kind of the history of say, right? Like what other blockchain has that in a storybook, visually driven way. And I think there's opportunity there. And again, that is taking somebody that is an amazing artist that is interested in comic books, and then how do you work Web3 uh, and your passions into this ecosystem. And I think that's a really smart way of doing it. So, uh, props to you, brother. So let's do this. Always have one question at the end. I don't know if you listen to a full podcast, you probably already know it by now. But before we do that, anything that you can share, I like to always ask in the future, what does the next 6 to 12 months look like for you?
That's really funny you say that because like the first 2 months are already planned out, like fully planned out, and with events and stuff. Like we've already given like some traits to well hopefully well I guess I've already shared it a little bit, so I guess why not. But yeah,
Yeah,
so we already have like traits sent to like Wiggs, who's also a talented designer, to where like we're gonna have like an animated like bobblehead looking zombie, and I think that's cool, right? Because a lot of people have mint date and then they don't really know what's next. Like you
right,
want to sort of like let your community guide and like feel like they have power over that. Like
right,
originally, they were supposed to be involved in our art process, right? Like there's a PFP creation channel, but like I didn't really get the feedback I was sort of hoping for. I wanted people to be like, "Oh, I want that trait," but
right,
anyone that was there, like, and they suggest a trait, we made sure to include it in our collection. That way, they
right,
feel like they're a piece of it. But
right.
a huge thing is our master collection that's going to be 2 to 3 months down the line. There's only 123 of them. So what you're talking about, like that close knit community, that's
Mm,
exactly what we're trying to facilitate through that with the 123. Not
right,
only are they all going to be like masterpiece type artwork, like there's 123 and they're all one of ones. But
right,
within that, there's going to be the Dobbs, Colony, Bump, like zombified in a very unique way to where you could still represent that community, right? So
right,
the main brand is like when I bought the Zomsays account, I also bought Horde. So it's about this collective of people coming together, like the collective of communities coming together. And one of our motto, or our motto, is infecting the Say ecosystem with positivity, right? So it's just about the whole pay it forward mentality and how we can illustrate that by how we're acting and just the narrative we take everyone along through our comic book.
I love it, man. And, I'm just saying, man, 120 something odd NFTs, you've met the first legit podcaster in the Say network. That might need to be part of the collection. All I'm saying.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
No, no, no.
Uh,
It's funny you mentioned that, right? Because that's actually already on our plans is to like start drawing out like some of the influencers, some of the podcasters. Like Jay always represents a Saiyan NFT, so we want to draw him like in a zombified form to where
right,
he will want to represent that art. Because I think that's also part of the storytelling aspect of things, right? Like introducing you into the comic, saying like the first podcaster or something like that. It's figuring out what to put in what order. That's going to be the hard part because
oh, yeah,
yeah, we don't want to like offend anyone. We want to like tell a story. So it's this chillaxer. I'm an NFT nerd. We're not a developer. Like my co-founder is a really talented artist. Like he's been drawing since 1991. He started horror art at 1998 and he started documenting it online in 2009. Just to
right,
give you a little bit of his backstory. So yeah, I mean, he's been involved in that a long time and I've just been a collector, trader, like part of a community member. And
yep.
one of my things is be the founder you wish you had, like be the community member you wish you had.
Uh,
Yeah.
I love that, man. Yeah, we're gonna put that down on yet another amazing tidbit that came from this conversation. Anything else? So those are short terms, but like, I'm assuming you're trying to build a company out of this. It's continued storytelling, lore, anything. And you don't have to share like exactly what you're doing, but when you
Sure.
think a year out, where do you want this? Where do you want Zombie Says to be?
So it's going to be the horde at that point. It's going to transition to the horde. And the idea of the horde is because I understand that we could fill the gap for a lot of people that are developers, that are like game builders. Like we already have like a like collab requests, like a Project Nigeria actually reached out, which I was very honored to. And we're not accepting a lot of these other collabs because out of like our respect for the SEI ecosystem, we don't want people just to come in and cheat. But like because Byron's such a talented and quick, well seasoned artist, the idea of that is we're going to be able to like draw like artwork for like let's say like communities like coffee break, so we could draw like an artwork for his game to where like we could build up a treasury of multi-chained assets that our users or our supporters can then leverage those assets or leverage those access in order to build out wealth on whatever chain they're on. And I think
Right.
like that's a play a lot of people aren't thinking about because it's like you said before, Web3, the whole idea and concept of Web3, it's all at the end of the day branding, branding, branding. You know,
Yep.
like it's just networking and you're building out that relationship.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it's brilliant. And now the question is, because I've seen a lot of very smart, previously successful people on my show, but a lot of them don't exist. So does the perseverance and the love and the passion and all things that you have can continue to drive you forward? I feel good about it after this conversation, and you know I'll be here to support. And basically, how I want to wind it down here is my wife's going to kill me. I always tell her I'm going to be an hour and a half, and next thing you know, I'm 3 hours in. Uh, I'll ask you my last question. I'll share my final comments, and then we'll call it a day. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds great.
Awesome. So, winding down, last question. You've been a part of spaces. You've done a ton or listened to a bunch of podcasts. Um, Listened and been part of the speaker board. How do you think your time on Midlife Crisis Podcast tonight went compared to the things that you're typically used to in Web3?
I actually really loved it because it's really crazy because a lot of the Twitter spaces and AMAs I'm a part of, like every AMA I attend, like there's always all these questions. But whenever I go up and I do my AMA, there's like no questions. And like it's it sort of feels odd. I mean, I know it could be a good thing, like, oh, you just answered everything or you touch base on so many things, but like I like the idea of like having that dialogue. And that's actually one of the most enjoyable things about this is that like you've actually asked me a lot of questions. You challenge me to think about various topics, and I don't know if it's an intimidating thing or people like don't want to say certain things or they just want to be supportive, but like I think you have to ask the right questions to seek the right to get the right answers or to navigate yourself into being the person you want to be.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate that feedback, and that's exactly what we're going for. I think there's a couple things I say to that is just listen, man, it's weird how we see people or PFPs online and we create this manifestation of who these people are. But at the end of the day, like we all bleed red blood. We all have similar experiences. We all have things that we can share and learn and educate from each other. And I think I've told you, or I don't know if I said it today or before, but like that's really my favorite part about what we do here is um I am now a better person going through this conversation because you gave me slightly different perspectives on the things that I had in my mind, and I've learned so much more. And if you're not learning and growing, I'm firmly convinced that's the day you start dying. So, uh, thank you so much for those kind words. And I think, you know, to kind of roll into my closing, there's a couple things that stood out at me. I think one, uh you shared some like really intimate moments and like things that are people aren't comfortable sharing, and to do that is insanely brave, right? I don't know what it is. I mean, I guess I do a good job of making you feel comfortable because it's amazing to me I mean, what? We had a half-hour conversation before this. We talked on Discord a couple times, and now we've talked for an hour and a half and talked about intimate life things. But you felt comfortable doing that, so I feel very fortunate that you did that, and I just want you to know that does not go unnoticed by me. Because it means the world and it makes for better content anyways, but you have to be insanely vulnerable to do that. And that's one of the hardest things that somebody can do. So thank you for that. Two, I really do think you have a great mindset. I love the discipline ego conversation, and the fact that you think of ego the way you think of that now is going to do you so much in the future to benefit you. Just to your point of you're saying, I'm talking to Project Gajira. Like if you have um, the wrong thought of ego, you're just going to latch on to what the hot thing is. And that might not be the best decision for your project in the future, right? So to be able to think about it, remove ego, and make the sound decisions is going to be amazing. So to hear you talk about that and know that you understand that, fantastic. Three, I think your concept is really interesting. I've heard comics, I've heard storytelling, right? But people use those as buzzwords. You actually use those words and then had an angle to be like, you could be the documenters and storytellers of the SEI network. And you have intelligent ways of like, how can you get other communities involved? And I think that's brilliant. So if you keep on going down that path, I think it's a good path to go down. I don't think anybody else is really doing it or thought of it that way. So bravo to you. And then fourth, I say this a lot, but I really mean it with you, man. You got a new friend. You got a friend in San Diego, California. I am here to help you anyway. Like I said, we'll be putting this podcast up for anybody to link to and listen to in the future. We'll cut this up into shorts to give you more visibility. And I can't wait to learn, grow, and just become closer over time, man. So I really, really appreciate it.
Dang, I just had goosebumps because you said San Diego, because like literally that's where I got sponsored for a card tournament. So if you, I could dox you privately a little bit. You can actually Google my name, and I won first place in that tournament. And
That's
the funny
awesome.
thing is, I wanted to split. I wanted to split 3 times. They're like, no, 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 don't want to split, and I ended up winning the whole thing.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, I mean, San Diego is it's not a bad place to live.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
but yeah, man, means and then finally, dude, time. You everybody's time. As you get older, you realize quickly time is the most valuable thing you have. So we're
Agreed.
at an hour and 42 minutes. That's an incredible amount of time worth a lot of actual money. So thank you so much, man. Uh, and that's it. And I think with that being said, the midlife crisis show has come to an end. What yet another beautiful conversation. We're going to have Sold One coming in hot on Friday. We're talking AI, art, and building a weed business. Who would have thought? Of course, we'll talk about some SEI too. But thank you so much for tuning in. By the way, Infinity, I don't know if we're getting botted or something, but there's 260 some people watching us right now. I
Oh, wow, nice.
I don't know where that happened. I'll tell you, I don't have 260 people in any spaces that I'm in, but they're watching this beautiful live podcast. So thank you for everybody that stopped by, and I hope this helped out, and I hope it informed you, and I hope you check Zom Says out. I'll say it right because this dude's got his head on straight, and they could be making something amazing, and it's freaking free. So why would you not look into it? Dude's just dropping knowledge and dropping love all around. Thank you so much for stopping by. We love you all. Mikey G and Infinity TCG are out.
Later.